Okay, so I'm now going to continue on with this painting on Puako, Hawaii. So what I've done this morning is I've just mixed up some paint. I'm going to do some highlights on the beach sand now. You can see it's got this really warm, lovely color, but I want to get some more light areas to it. So I've taken a bit of my titanium white and I've added a bit of cadmium yellow and a bit of my magenta to it. And it gives you this kind of light color. So I'm just going to see how that looks on the canvas. Before I do that though, I just thought I would show you guys how I keep my paint from drying out. So a lot of this paint I had from yesterday, and you know, paint's expensive, so instead of wasting it, what I did is I just splashed some water on it with a sprayer, and I have this piece of plastic that I've cut to fit the exact shape, and I just like put it on top. And what it does is seals it in and makes it so the paint's still wet today. So if you do use one of these butcher trays, it's a really nice way to make it so your paint doesn't dry out. Okay, so I'm gonna get my reference photo in hand, and I can see here that there's some areas in the sand where there's some lighter values, like over here and over here. I'm not gonna worry about it being exactly the same, but I am gonna try to put those in. So I'm gonna come in here, and I think, yeah, I need to fix this area. So this is an area where there's a tree trunk that I was doing, and then I changed a bit. It's right there, so I'm gonna do that this morning too. Yeah, and I can tell that the sand I did over here needs to be a lot lighter in value. So I'm just gonna go over it. And I'm using my large brush again. This is my Legato number 16. It's about almost a 2-inch brush. And it's one that I got at Opus. I just love this brush. I just got it the other day. What I like about it is it's really nice for doing these large paintings. Because when you're doing a large painting, small brush would take so long, and this lets me be more expressive with my strokes. So I recommend it. Okay, so I'm gonna come in here and look for where there's some highlights in the sand. I can see underneath this tree here, there's a bit coming in, and then I'm just going to do some kind of large, just expressive strokes. I'm not going to really worry about, you know, if it matches the picture or not right now. I'm just going to kind of try to get it in there. And then maybe later, I'll come in and change it. So the sand at the bottom of the picture is a little bit choppy from people walking in it. So to kind of show that, I'm just going to have the brush stroke kind of go up and down a little bit. Okay. So with the same color, I'm now going to look through the painting and see if there's any other areas that it works. So I'm going to look for highlights in the photo. And what I mean by that is when I look here at this photo, I can see there's some areas where there's brightness right here, along my rocks, along my branches here, that shows where the light's hitting. So because this color is in the sand, it's nice and harmonious to then use it again in other parts of the painting. So I'm going to just use that paint that I've already mixed and come in and just do some highlights. And with acrylic paint, what happens is that as it dries actually darker than when you paint it on, and you lose some of the vibrancy with the color as it dries. So you might paint something and think, oh, that's exactly how I want it, and then you come back later and you're like, oh, that's not what I was expecting, or oh, okay, I have to do that area again. And that's just because, as I say, as the acrylic dries, the color changes slightly. Just like with any paint, it almost always will dry darker. So bear that in mind. So as I'm doing these layers, the reason I have to keep layering the lights and the highlights is that the highlight will tend to dry darker, it'll show the color from behind, and you kind of lose some of that hit of color that you're trying to put on. So I think the one thing to think about with that is layering and then coming back with pure white at the very end of the painting to put in some real highlights, but doing that when all the paint is dried. So now I'm going to come into the rocks area here again, and I'm going to just try to put in some of the highlights on these rocks. Today I'm going to show you how to glaze onto the rocks to change the color and the tint of the rocks. And this is something that I learned how to do not that long ago. And it really changed how I was able to paint. So what it is it's a technique where you mix paint. It has to be one of the transparent paints. So don't try to do this with your titanium white or there's some other paints that if you look at the back of the paint tube, the opacity that's marked there is too high for it to make a transparent paint. And I'll try to show you what I mean by that in just a minute. But essentially you want a pigment or paint that's mostly transparent. And what you're going to do with that is you're going to mix some of it with the glazing liquid. And it's going to end up create a clear tinted paint, I guess, that you can put over top of something that you've painted. And what I really, really like about this is, let's say I really like how I've done something. I like the shape. I like, the values. I think I've really done a good job with that, but the color isn't quite right. This is the way you rescue it, okay? Is by doing that. And it's such a fun and easy thing to learn how to do. The only thing with it that you have to bear in mind is that you have to make sure that the paint that you're going over top of is dry. I'll say it again. So if you're going to glaze, make sure that the paint underneath is dry. If it's not dry, what will happen is your glaze will mix with the paint underneath. It'll get all muddied up and you'll be frustrated. So make sure that you let it dry and then give it a try. So I think what I'll do is I'll show you how to do that on these rocks once they dry. Right now, I'm going to talk a bit about the leaves. So one of the things I did between this video and the last video is I put in some of the leaves. All I did with that is using my colors to mix green. One of the things that you can see about the colors I'm using here is I've got some cool greens, I've got some warm greens, I've got some kind of almost acid green going on here, I've got some mint green. The thing with making things look real is that you have to kind of do all the colors. So if you take say your phthalo blue and you mix it with yellow, you'll get one shade of green. Phthalo blue tends to, because it's turquoise, it can produce a turquoise blue or it can even go to a minty green color. If you're trying to make like a forest green or this kind of army green here, the best way to do that would be with cadmium yellow with a bit of ultramarine blue, and that'll give you kind of those mossy green colors. By varying the amount of blue and yellow, you'll get different greens. So this blue here, this green is a lot more blue in it, so that's got more phthalo blue in it. And then this green here is a lot more yellow than blue. And one of the paint colors I'm just going to show you here that I use a lot when I'm painting leaves is a color from Golden called green gold. So this color here is really nice for doing trees, leaves, and if you look at the back of it, it's in the middle between transparent and opaque, so you can use this to glaze over leaves as well to change the color. One of the other things I'm just going to quickly talk about before I do more of the leaves is a little bit about color theory and the warmth or coolness of colors. So one of the things that makes your painting a lot more beautiful is if you know about warm versus cool colors. So for example, a warm color would be this sand. Okay, this is kind of a warm peachy pink color. A cool color on this painting would be the blue here. So this dark blue is a cool color. But there's also some kind of, I would say, somewhat confusing nomenclature with warm versus cool. In the greens, it's not that confusing. So a cool green would be this bluey one. A warm green would be one of these. And some people wonder, well, how do I mix a warm versus a cool color? So that's a really good question. And in another video, I'm going to show you some color mixing just as a short video on how to do that. But what I wanted to just quickly talk about is when you're trying to make your painting more beautiful, remember that things that are in shadow or a darker area should be a cool color, and things that are in sun should be warm, okay? So that's how your eye reads it. So for example, if I had if I didn't have so much warm paint here in the sand would look cooler, it would look darker, you wouldn't get the impression that there's light on it. Whereas here in the shadow, this is a cool color, this is a kind of a bluey purple color that gives you the impression that it's cooler, it's in the shade. And again, through the trees and the leaves as well, wherever the shadow is, it'll be more of a blue area. And So what you can do is when you've done your painting, you can come back and you can look for that and try to really make that happen in your painting by adding areas that are cool where there's shadow and areas that are warm where there's light, and it'll just give it a lot more interest. Okay, so I'm going to just check and see if this is dry. So actually, I think these little areas over my rocks have dried, so I'm going to do my glaze demonstration real quickly. So when I look at my reference photo, I can see that the highlights in my rocks are kind of almost like a peachy pink color. And I've done my initial brush strokes in that, it's like a white yellow. So what I want to do is I'm going to mix a color that I think is similar to that, just using the glaze and a large brush. And what I want to do is just paint it over top of the highlights. So I'm not going to be too fussy about it, but it's important that you have a clean brush. So actually, I think I'm just going to start with a new one here to make sure that I don't bring any other colors into this. So I'm going to take a bit of my quinacridone crimson and mix that with the glaze. And I'm just going to see, this is a really easy glaze to do, I'm just going to see what that looks like. Okay, so you can see here I'm brushing it over that area. And what it did is it turned that area kind of pinky red. It actually looks really cool, but I think the color isn't quite right. So I'm going to take that color and I'm going to add a bit of the azo gold to it. So it's going to become a bit more orange. And I'm going to try that out on a different one. Okay. And then I'm going to stand back and I'm going to look at it. So as I look at it, I can tell that I actually think that the pink one, even though initially I thought it wasn't right, is closer to what I want. So what I'll do then is just take a paper towel. Because it has glazing liquid in it, you can wipe it off, or you should be able to. There. And I'm going to do all these rocks with that glaze on them. So I'm going to just go over, oops. I'm going to go over those areas again. And it's basically mostly quinacridone red that I'm using. In the glazing liquid. Okay. So you can see how it transforms that area, which was the highlights that I painted. You can see the brush stroke is still remaining through there, but it's tinting it. I would use the word tinting. I think that's the best way to think about how this technique works. So you can see now I've tinted my rocks, and because they have that orange color to them, it looks like they're glowing in the sunset, which is what I'm trying to go for here. So I'm just gonna kind of wash this over, and that's starting to look a lot more like my picture. Okay, so I'm gonna show you another one. Quickly, I'm gonna show you a glaze over my leaves. So for that, I'm gonna get another brush, and I'm gonna do, again, glazing medium, but I'm gonna try it with phthalo blue. So phthalo blue is that beautiful turquoise blue, and when you glaze over with phthalo blue mixed in with medium, phthalo is a cool turquoise blue. Looks like this. So if I glaze this over half of a leaf, for example, I get the shape of my leaf. But it now looks like that leaf is in the shadow. Similarly, if I do that there, so it doesn't remove what's below, it just changes the color of it. So this is a really nice way to come back in your painting after you've laid out your shapes if you want to add some more interest. If I glaze right over one of my bright green areas, I'll show you that over here. You can see that it almost appears transparent, and it gives you a different color. It's a totally different color than what you've mixed, but I think it's really interesting. If I put it just straight on the back, which is that pink background, it'll look blue, okay? But if I put it over top of this green here, all of a sudden it darkens and deepens that green. If I want to take it to do, say, part of a leaf, like the shadow on a leaf, I can do that. I can come along and put some shadows in. So I think that's like a really powerful technique in acrylic painting, and like I say, I didn't know about it until very recently. Okay, so that's it for this video. I'm gonna carry on working on my leaves a little bit, and I'll come back to show you some more later about the rocks.